Well, thank you for that introduction there. I forgot some of those videos, so I appreciate that. Before I get started, I want to talk for a moment about the great Secretary of Education that you all have here. Just listening to Secretary Graves right there, I've heard him speak multiple times. What a clear vision for kids in South Dakota to get back to reading, to understand history, to understand resiliency and character. Absolutely love the work that he's doing here. And he rewrote the history standards here in South Dakota. We're working on that in Oklahoma. So you guys got a great Secretary of Education here. Love the direction that South Dakota's going. So that's fantastic. So Politico called me the lead crusader in the country for education. NBC News called me the most controversial person in education. Why? What have I done that's so controversial? What makes me the lead crusader according to these left-wing rags? Well, I want to tell you a little bit of the story of Oklahoma's education and our reforms and our turnaround there. And I think you're going to see some of it, but let's start first with what are we dealing with? Folks, our education system has been hijacked by a national teachers union, by radical leftists for decades now. And you've seen the results of it. You've seen kids that have been taught to hate their country. You've seen kids that have been taught to hate the traditional family. And you've seen kids turn against Christianity and their faith. This is not a coincidence. This has been a strategy of the left. It started in higher ed institutions in the 1960s. If you guys remember President Obama, you remember all those murky connections he had when he ran for president. People started talking about the professors and the connections he had in Chicago and how left-wing radical they were. We saw these individuals taking over colleges across the country. And now we've seen it in our K-12 system. So what we've done is take on the most aggressive agenda in the country in Oklahoma to put family values at the center of everything that we do. We know that God created families as the basic building block of society. And we know that God gave kids to their parents, not to bureaucrats. So the first thing that we did, the first thing on our agenda when I was elected 2 years ago was to pass universal school choice so that every child could go to the school that their parents thought was best for them. This is essential. It is so important that every child has that opportunity, that parents can choose to send their kids to a private school, to a charter school, or homeschool them. Folks, I've met a lot of homeschool parents in the house tonight. I love that. We've got a lot here. And folks, it makes the left so angry to put parents in charge because, again, they control so many of these systems. And when you put parents in charge through school choice, that power is taken from them and it's put right where it should belong with parents. And folks, I want to say one other thing about homeschooling that's so important as well. Isn't one of the biggest issues we're facing today in society a breakdown of the family unit? So when families want to spend more time with their kids, when families want to be more engaged with their kids on a daily basis, would we not want to encourage that? Should we not want their taxpayer dollars to continue to support those efforts? Folks, I think it's very important that everything that we do in education is focused around connecting the family as close as possible. In my agency, every day we talk about it. What are we doing to strengthen the role of the family in a child's life? And so many times today, you hear from some of the national figures that they want to replace the family. You hear from the National Teachers Union. You hear from the Federal Department of Education. Folks, Secretary Graves did a great job of talking about the science of reading. And folks, you all remember how you were taught reading when you were a kid? You remember phonics? Do you remember one of the best-selling infomercials of all time was Hooked on Phonics? Anybody remember Hooked on Phonics? Very simple, very direct, wasn't it? You sound out syllables. You memorize those syllables. You connect them together. And guess what? You can read. Well, how in the world did we get so far that many of our colleges of education were teaching memorization and coding and things that 3Qing that weren't science of reading? This was pushed by the Department of Education. The Department of Education, folks, let me just be straightforward with you on this. It shouldn't exist. We should not have a federal Department of Education. Can you even imagine the founding fathers today if they knew that we had a Department of Education that sits in Washington, D.C., and tells the states, tells parents how to educate their kids? It's absurd. Let me do a little best of some of the greatest hits that came from our federal Department of Education. Y'all remember Common Core Math? That's where that came from. You guys, we just talked about reading. Let's go through a few more. What about diversity, equity, and inclusion? What about critical race theory? What about radical transgender theory? Folks, I'm going to tell you, this transgender theory is the craziest thing you've ever seen. When I came into office, I had parent after parent coming to me saying, why do they have books about boys turning into girls in my kindergartner's classroom? Why is there graphic pornography in my second grader's classroom showing gay sex scenes? I mean, and I'm not talking about describing them or I mean showing them. So I began removing those books out of every classroom in the state of Oklahoma. And folks, I came under heavy fire. First from our friends in the media, who I want to walk you through kind of the way the media deals with so many of these issues. First of all, it was denial. These books aren't in our kids' libraries. Well, we began compiling them. We began documenting how many times we found them. Then the media turned the story to, well, it's really not that bad. Okay? So then I had a board meeting, and we put all of the worst scenes on the big screen. And we had 10, 12 media outlets there. I said, I want you to play this on the news tonight. You say it's not as bad as I say it is. Well, let's just let the viewers decide. Let's let everyone see what's being pushed on their kids in our schools. And I kid you not, we get an email from one of the producers of one of our news stations that said, look, we know that you asked for us to put that in our coverage. We can't include that. There might be kids watching our show tonight. It's funny if it wasn't so sad, isn't it, folks? That's a serious producer that emailed us that. And folks, I continue to come under fire by folks who say that you've got to be inclusive. You've got to include all of this in your kids' education. That's the most absurd argument that you could possibly make. Folks, we all know that as parents and grandparents, right? You don't show your 4-year-old every image known to man. You know that that's a terrible way to raise a child. You know that you've got to give them age-appropriate material. Folks, we've got to fight back on this radical agenda to indoctrinate kids at the earliest of ages. And folks, I'm coming to you from Oklahoma. Believe me, we're not a blue state. All 77 counties in Oklahoma voted for Donald Trump twice. We're proud of that, by the way. Very proud of that. President Trump, he tweeted at me a few weeks ago, said, I love what Ryan's doing in Oklahoma, and I just love Oklahoma. Every county there voted for me every time. I was like, that's right, President Trump. So we're very, very proud of that. But folks, the left knows if they can push this agenda into a red state, it's over. I mean, it's over. Because I will give the left credit on this. It's time and time again, you see it with every communist movement, don't you? They push it on the kids. They push it on the next generation. They lie about the history of their people, of what they're doing, and they want to indoctrinate kids and turn kids against the country, against their family, against their faith. We cannot allow that to happen. I'm asking you, I'm imploring you, hold the line for good conservative values in South Dakota. I want to tell you about a few more reforms we did that just made the teachers' unions lose their mind. And folks, remember I told you I'm an elected official. So in my election, The National Teachers Union poured over $6 million to defeat me. They were not successful, but I want you to get a sense of those numbers. Never before had $2 million been spent in our superintendent race. They spent $6 million. They came after me very, very aggressively because they knew that we meant business on this reform agenda. So one of the other things that we did is we brought merit pay to the classroom. Crazy concept, right? If a teacher does great, we want to pay you more. So we allow the highest performing teachers in Oklahoma to make up to 6 figures and stay in the classroom. The teachers' unions fought us on that. We also said we want the highest rated teachers in the country to come to Oklahoma. So we said we're going to pay teachers up to $50,000 if you're in the top 5% in your state to move to Oklahoma. We were very aggressive. And folks, look, the free market works. But guess what? So many times we heard the argument, not in education, not in education. Well, of course it works in education. We're talking about people. We're talking about human nature. That's why the free market works. And I want to tell you about some of our successes. So folks, I'm going to tell you, Oklahoma, we were at the bottom in education rankings. One of the things I focused in on is we have this F school list, we call it. That means you're in the bottom 5% nationally. We had 190 districts that were in the bottom 5% nationally. Terrible, terrible statistics. We had never before had more than 40 schools come off of that F list. Never before had more than 40. In my first year, I told those school districts, you are going to get off that F list. And if you don't, there's a few things that are going to happen. Number one, I may come in and fire the superintendent. We did fire the superintendent of our biggest district in the state, Tulsa Public Schools, which was our lowest performing. And let me tell you, they are now seeing the biggest increase in reading scores that they've seen in decades because they have a leader who believes in the success of those kids. But we told all 190 schools that. We also told all 190 schools that, by the way, now we have school choice. So you know what that means? I will be sending every parent in your district a letter to let them know how bad your kids have been performing and to let them know that they have the ability to send their kid to any school they want. Now that's a motivation, folks. So we had never before had more than 40 schools come off of that F list. In my first year, we had 119 schools come off of that F list. We're very proud of that, very proud. We've come under heavy attack for these reforms, but these reforms work. The free market works. The basics in education are true today, just like they were 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. And folks, the fight that we're currently in is a big one. We looked at our history courses. We looked at what our kids were learning in our different courses around the state. And there was something that was missing that was incredibly painful. We first had the clear indication that our kids are not as patriotic as they used to be. Our kids don't love this country as much as they used to. And we looked at our history courses. I'm a former history teacher myself. And we said we have got to bring back patriotism in our schools. And as we began to dig deeper, we found something that was missing that had to be returned. That's the Bible. So we are very proud to be the first state in the country to put a Bible back in every classroom. And folks, I've debated this on CNN, NBC, MSNBC, and I'm going to tell you, we have got an incredible argument to make here. How do you understand American history without the Bible? Let's start with the Pilgrims. If you can't talk about the Bible and you can't talk about Christianity, how'd the Pilgrims get here? Why did they come over to this country? If you can't talk about the Bible and you can't talk about Christianity in a classroom, where did Thomas Jefferson say our rights came from? Let me give you one more, it's a little more recent. By the way, look at every presidential speech. Look at Lincoln especially. Look at the Bible verses that he quoted. Look at what he talked about in the Civil War. But you can look at almost every president. Look at how many times they talk about the Bible. They talk about Bible verses. We have stripped those out of our schools. We have lied to kids and told them That we're just a secular country. There's no role that faith or religion played here. What a load of baloney. That is not true. The left, look, they don't have to like it. They can be offended by it. But they cannot rewrite our history. Martin Luther King Jr., he's sitting in a jail in Birmingham. And he writes the letter from a Birmingham jail. It's an incredible letter because why? He was being attacked because they said, you broke the law. You said you're a moral, upstanding citizen. And you broke the law. How do you defend yourself? What did he say? It's a wonderful letter, short letter, but wonderful. He says, well, first of all, I'm a Christian. And I look in the Bible. I look at Daniel. I look at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and I see a God who says, you don't violate my law. If the world's laws violate my law, you go with my law. So that's what I did. That's not me saying that. That's Martin Luther King Jr. How do you tell kids about why Martin Luther King Jr. thought it was acceptable to break the law, to advocate for civil rights, if you can't mention the Bible verses that he cited? You see the absurdity of what we've allowed the left to do in education. We've allowed them to push this myth of neutrality. But I'm going to tell you, it's not neutral to gut our history of what these incredible individuals in our history said about why they did the things they did. It's state-sponsored atheism is what it is. It's telling your kids that faith never played a role in this country, and that's a lie. Folks, we have got to get back to teaching what makes America exceptional. I told you about the things we got out of school. It's more important of what you're putting in it. It's more important of what are our kids learning. We've got to stop all of the radicalism that the left is pushing on our kids, and we got to get back to telling the story of America and inspiring the next generation to continue to make this the greatest country in the history of the world. But it starts with understanding what made us that great country in the first place. And we are very excited to be leading that fight in Oklahoma. And folks, I'm telling you, we come under tremendous fire. I'm going to shoot you straight. I come under tremendous fire from my own party sometimes. I have rhinos in my party. Folks, hey, I'll go ahead and say it. My own Speaker of the House has been coming after me lately. I will not back down. Folks, these issues are too important. These are too important. Folks, I'm going to tell you something. Norman Woods is leading the fight here in South Dakota. He is leading the fight. The family voice is out at that Capitol advocating for family values, to put the family back where it should be the center of all of society. But I'm going to tell you, I know that Norman and Caroline come under heavy fire. I know that every one of you in this room come under heavy fire for standing for your faith, for standing for your conservative values. But folks, I'm gonna make an ask of you tonight. You already are here and have made that sacrifice and have sacrificed for this cause. I'm also going to ask you to open up your checkbooks and give to the family voice, because I'm telling you, someone has to be up at that Capitol advocating. Someone has to be informing families. And Norman and I were talking about this earlier. You know, families, you've got to keep them informed. I got 4 little kids at home. So we're juggling, baseball practice, just like all of you are, right? Then we got to get a babysitter if we're here or there. Probably a lot of you are doing that tonight, right? It's so important that we keep families involved and engaged in knowing what's going on at the Capitol, keeping them engaged in these major issues. The family voice is doing that. Let me tell you, everything else is being advocated for at the Capitol. Special interest, they've got unlimited amounts of money to go in and push an agenda. We have got to support good people that are fighting that fight. It has been an honor to get to talk to you tonight. It's been an honor to get to meet so many of you. But I'm going to tell you, the family voice is doing tremendous work. And I want to encourage you to continue to support them, to continue this work that's going on. And folks, I think it's tremendous what you guys are doing here. Please defeat that abortion amendment. My goodness, it is so sick how obsessed the left is with killing babies. You guys can be, I was talking to some folks earlier tonight, one of the first states to defeat an abortion amendment like that. That would be tremendous for the whole country. Family Voice is out there fighting for that. So folks, please continue. And by the way, I say all this to say, in closing, I'm incredibly optimistic. I'm incredibly optimistic because of people like you. These church leaders in this room, these legislators in this room, Lieutenant Governor, the mayor, what a tremendous mayor. He's a rock star. I got to talk to him earlier. Yeah, he is fantastic. This is inspiring. You are inspiring. But the left will not stop, so I want to encourage you to keep fighting even harder and continue to support Family Voice. Thank you all so much for having me here tonight. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.